Just over 11 months ago, on October 16th of 2022, we started the rebuild of this wrecked 2021 Honda Civic Type R. We spent the next few months completely repairing this car, getting it back to its factory condition, and then on November 28th, the wrecked rebuild was 100% finished, and this car was back to factory condition. We enjoyed the car for a few months, all stock, and then on March 31st, I decided I'm bored of the car, I'm gonna tear it all apart, and I am going to build the world's first all-wheel drive Civic Type R. Today is a very, very special day because today marks the 100th episode. So close to being done with this car, and this is the point where myself and a lot of other people will just call it a day, call it good, go slap a tune on it, and enjoy the car. But I want to take this thing all the way through the finish line. I want to see it through, and I want to get all of the little tiny minuscule issues with the car fixed. And that is what we are going to focus on today. The first thing I am working on right now is trying to get the audio to work on the radio. As you can see, we can turn it up and no sound comes out. After doing a little bit of digging around, I did find the amplifier for the stereo system on Identifix here. So I went over to the car and I found out something that is probably not allowing our audio to work with the radio. And that is this wire right here. This here is an antenna wire that plugs into the amplifier. And me not knowing this was a antenna wire, I went ahead and just connected it back together. But antenna wires are a little bit different. So how an antenna wire is set up is you have the inner part of the wire right here, and then you have all this wire around it. If your antenna wire breaks in half, you cannot just connect everything at once. That has to be reconnected, and these outers have to be reconnected separately. I don't know what it is with this car and broken antenna wires. There was another antenna wire that was broken. That one ran from the back of the radio up to the actual antenna on the roof. Thankfully, we were able to replace that wire. But with this wire here, it is part of the actual wiring harness on the chassis of the car, so it cannot be replaced and it has to be repaired. I spent the next few minutes carefully soldering back together this antenna wire, making sure the center conductor does not make any contact with the outer shield. Now, if this works, I am going to be so freaking excited. I always tell myself I'm not good at wiring or anything like electrical at all, but that was definitely a problem, and I'm hoping it fixes their audio. Nothing. I decided it's best to start checking out some easy stuff first. Tested every fuse on the car, all those checked out fine. So it was time to move on to some deeper diagnostics. We've spent the last couple hours going through the whole diagnostic process on Identifix here. So we are on diagnostic check number 12, which means we've checked 11 other things on the car so far, and everything is checking out. No matter what we do, I cannot get any audio to come out of this radio, and I'm kind of starting to think the head unit itself may be bad. We were nearing the end of the diagnostic testing, and I found another problem with the antenna wire that we repaired earlier. So if this here is the internal wire, in that box right there is this casing. This wire pulled out, so it actually wasn't plugging all the way into the amplifier. I tried to repair it, and as you can see, there is literally nothing left of this antenna wire. So I'm gonna head to the local Honda dealer, bring this thing with me, and see if I can just get any random antenna wire, and then I will take the new one, cut it, splice it into the chassis harness of the car, and hopefully that will fix our freaking harness and radio issue. Instead of spending a bunch of money at the local Honda dealer, we ran up to the local wrecking yard and got ourselves a new antenna pigtail. No way. We finally, oh my gosh, you guys know, if you've been following, I can't even talk. If you've been following the build, you know how many different times I've tried to get this radio to work. No way. I think I'm more excited about the radio working than my transmission being done. There's never nothing like a hell yes. Next up on today's agenda is getting the reverse light to activate on the taillights when we back up. And I think if we can get that to work, it's automatically gonna get the backup camera to work on the radio as well, which of course we don't need a backup camera. It would be cool, but we probably should have the reverse lights working. Instead of trying to dig through the wiring diagram, we have another Type R. I'm gonna go swap Bobby cars, bring the Type R back here, and figure out exactly what wires we need to connect to the car from the all-wheel drive transmission to get this to work properly.
Maybe you try it.
Guess what, Bobby?
What?
I got my Type R radio working.
Radio? Heck yeah, now I can steal it for good. Devin has a big butt.
Oh, this thing is very stock. With Bobby's Type R in the shop, it was time to pull this thing apart and get the OEM FK8 reverse sensor removed. So here is what I found out. The reverse sensor on the all-wheel drive transmission is only a 2-wire, and the reverse sensor on the Type R is a 4-wire. Miraculously enough, we should be able to put a stock Type R reverse sensor onto the all-wheel drive trans. The threads are the same, the ball sticks out the same amount, so that is gonna be a huge plus. So what my plan is, I'm gonna put this on the all-wheel drive trans, and then we're going to dissect our engine wiring harness. This is the factory Type R engine harness, and I need to get this green plug off right here, which is for the reverse sensor, trace exactly where that goes into the ECU, because we are still running the factory ECU on this car, as well as the Haltech. We're running 2 ECUs. And if I plug this in to the ECU where it belongs, that should be all we need, as far as I know. Let's try it. After carefully narrowing down this entire engine harness to just 4 wires, it was time to test my theory. There's no way it's gonna be this easy, but let's give it a shot. No way. Holy smokes. Our 2021 all-wheel drive Civic Type R has a factory working backup camera. Just loomed up our reverse harness. Of course, the sensor has to go back on Bobby's car. Honda dealer said it's gonna be about a week until our sensor comes in. As soon as it does, plug this guy in and we're done. The next thing I have decided to tackle is getting air conditioning to work on the Type R. We can either do this the very, very easy way, or we can do it the complicated way. The complicated way is running AC through the factory controls, which let me pop in the car and show you guys what it's like in a factory Type R, how the air conditioning works. We have our climate control here. Now the tough part is, and of course they just had to make this so much more difficult. Hit climate on here, and of course, they had to integrate it with the head unit itself. I went ahead, printed off all the wiring diagrams for the climate control, and I'm realizing it's gonna be very, very, very difficult for me to figure out how to run it through the factory control. We are gonna be controlling the AC compressor through the Haltech, and all the Haltech needs to turn on is an input. Unfortunately, to get a proper input from the car, we're gonna need a whole lot of more sensors on the car that we don't even have. Or the easy way is having a separate switch that we click to turn on the AC compressor. Now, of course, the Haltech is still gonna control when the AC compressor is on and off, but to actually give the Haltech the signal that we want air conditioning to be active, I think I'm just gonna go with a separate switch. The goal with this AC setup was to have it as OEM as possible. Of course, not being able to run it through the factory head unit was a bummer, but the next best thing was to use a factory button. So this button right here is gonna turn on and turn off our AC. And how I know that it's working, I have it all wired into the Haltech. You can see the AC request switch input right there. So right now it's on, click it, it goes off, click it, it goes back on. And whenever it shows on, that doesn't mean the actual AC compressor is gonna be, been jamming out because my radio finally works. That doesn't mean the actual AC compressor is gonna be on. There is all of these other conditions with the Haltech that we can adjust. So minimum engine running time, max RPM, if you want to turn it off during a pull, max TPS, all this other stuff as well. And of course, the engine does have to be running for the AC compressor to actually work. Next step is just to wire the output from the Haltech to the actual AC compressor, and then we can fire up the car and see if the compressor is actually kicking on. All right, so we have everything wired up for the AC compressor. We have power to the AC compressor, which in turn should be turning it on. We're not running any sort of AC lines or anything right now, so there's no pressure in the system, but I bypassed the AC pressure switch with the Haltech ECU. So hypothetically speaking, the compressor should be kicking on with the car running when I hit the button. It's getting power, but it's not turning on. Either one of two things is going on. Either number one, our brand new AC compressor is bad, Or number 2, there's an internal pressure switch in the AC compressor that is not allowing it to turn on until it's seeing pressure. I'm gonna go pick up another AC compressor and test it just to see if our compressor is bad or not. And if ours is good, I'll just return it and go ahead, build our AC lines, get some refrigerant in the car, and hopefully then the AC compressor will kick on. $638 later, we got a new AC compressor. I sure hope mine's fine. That's a lot of money. After making sure the new AC compressor was properly grounded to the chassis, I applied a 12-volt signal to it. I could not get the new compressor to turn on either. So it was time for the next step, building all 3 AC lines. First piece we had to get figured out was the bulkhead. So I took 2 aluminum adapter fittings, shaved them down, welded them together, and came out with this beautiful looking piece. I really wanted to keep this engine bay as clean as possible, so after a little bit of thinking, I pulled off the wheel, inner fender, and the fender itself, and decided to run the AC lines in the inner fender well. We got all of the AC lines built, adapter fittings in the proper location, and installed all of the lines onto the car. The full AC system is built, all of the lines are ran. Toughest part by far was definitely getting that little bulkhead on the firewall built for the lines. It's all done, so let's go ahead, slap in some refrigerant, and hopefully our AC compressor will kick on. If it never kicks on, then we got bigger problems. Spent the next few minutes making sure there's no leaks, pressurizing the system, and trying everything to get this AC compressor to kick on. Unfortunately, no matter what I try, I cannot get this AC compressor to turn on. I can either give the compressor a power signal, which is not turning on, or a ground signal, which is not turning on. Unfortunately, and fortunately, I do need to stop working on that because bright and early tomorrow morning, the biggest day of this car build is here, which if you guys do not know what I'm talking about, you will when that video comes out. I'm super excited for it. This thing's gonna be fast, I hope. Cross your fingers. Nearly every little issue with the car is now fixed, which is exciting. Made a ton of progress today. And as soon as we can get the AC compressor to kick on, we will have AC in our all-wheel drive swapped FK8. And the coolest part is, that's the only part of the AC lines you see. I decided to shoot them out the side, inner fender, and connect up here. Factory they would run in the engine bay. But of course I wanted this bay to stay as clean as possible. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up button and I'll see you in the next episode.